Sarah Chen walked into the office building at exactly 7:30 every morning. She did this for 12 years. The security guard, Mike, always nodded at her. He knew she would be the first person to arrive at Morrison and Associates accounting firm. Sarah wore the same type of clothes every day. A simple cardigan sweater, a plain skirt, and comfortable shoes. Her hair was always pulled back in a neat bun. She carried a brown leather bag that looked old but clean. Nothing about Sarah stood out. She looked like any other office worker in the city. The elevator took her to the 5th floor. Sarah's desk was in the corner, away from the windows. She liked it there because it was quiet. Her computer was old and her chair squeaked when she moved. But Sarah never complained about anything. Her job was simple. She filed papers, answered phone calls, and typed reports. When clients called with questions about their taxes, Sarah helped them. She spoke in a soft voice and was always polite. The clients liked her because she was patient and helpful. Sarah's co-workers were different from her. They talked loudly about their weekend plans. They went to expensive restaurants and took vacations to other countries. During lunch breaks, they gathered in the break room and shared stories about their lives. Jennifer from marketing always talked about her yoga classes and her new boyfriend. Tom from sales bragged about the expensive car he just bought. Lisa from human resources showed pictures of her kids playing soccer and going to dance classes. Sarah listened to their conversations but never joined in. She sat at her desk and ate her homemade sandwich. Every day she brought the same lunch. A turkey sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. She made everything at home to save money. Sometimes, while eating lunch, Sarah would hum quietly. The melodies were beautiful, but no one paid attention. Her co-workers were too busy talking about their own lives. They thought Sarah was just the quiet woman who worked in the corner. Brad Jenkins was the worst. He worked in marketing and thought he was very important. Brad wore expensive suits and talked loudly on his phone. He made jokes about people who were not like him. Sarah heard him call her the mouse in the corner when he thought she could not hear him. Linda was Sarah's supervisor. She was not mean, but she did not really notice Sarah either. Linda gave Sarah her work assignments and checked that everything was done correctly. She thought Sarah was a good worker, but nothing special. After work, most people went to bars or restaurants together. They invited each other to parties and movies. Sarah was never invited. She did not mind because she had somewhere important to go. Sarah's apartment was small and simple. It was on the 3rd floor of an old building. The walls were white and she had basic furniture. A small couch, a kitchen table, and a bed. But in the corner of her living room stood something special. An old upright piano sat against the wall. The wood was dark brown and had some scratches on it. Some of the keys were slightly yellow with age. But Sarah loved this piano more than anything else in the world. This piano belonged to her grandmother, Rose. Grandmother Rose had taught Sarah to play when she was a little girl. Sarah remembered sitting on her grandmother's lap, learning to press the keys. Her small fingers could barely reach all the notes, but she tried very hard. Every evening after work, Sarah would sit at the piano. She would place her fingers on the keys and begin to play. The music that came out was beautiful and complex. Sarah played pieces by famous composers like Chopin, Mozart, and Beethoven. She knew these songs by memory. When Sarah played, she became a different person. Her back became straight and her fingers moved with perfect control. The music filled her small apartment and made it feel like a concert hall. Her neighbors sometimes heard the music through the thin walls, but they did not know it was Sarah playing. Sarah played every evening for at least 2 hours. Sometimes she played sad songs that made her cry. Other times she played fast, exciting pieces that made her heart race. The piano was her friend, her teacher, and her escape from the ordinary world. On weekends, Sarah spent even more time at the piano. She would wake up early and play until late at night. She practiced difficult pieces over and over until they were perfect. Her fingers knew exactly which keys to press, even in the most challenging parts. Sarah never told anyone at work about her piano playing. She thought they would not understand. They saw her as just a quiet office worker who did her job and went home. They would probably laugh if they knew she could play classical music. Sometimes Sarah dreamed about playing on a big stage in front of many people. She imagined wearing a beautiful dress and sitting at a grand piano. The audience would listen carefully to every note. When she finished playing, they would clap and cheer, but these were just dreams. In real life, Sarah was just an office worker. She filed papers and answered phones. She ate lunch alone and went home to her small apartment. Only her piano knew the real Sarah. The years passed slowly. Sarah watched her co-workers get promoted, get married, and buy houses. She stayed in the same job, living the same quiet life. Every day was like the day before. Sarah was 42 years old now. She had worked at Morrison and Associates for 12 years. Her hair was starting to show some gray and she wore glasses for reading. She looked older and more tired than before. But every evening when Sarah sat at her piano, she felt young again. Her fingers still moved perfectly across the keys. The music still filled her heart with joy and sadness. The piano was the only place where Sarah felt truly alive. Sarah did not know that her life was about to change. She did not know that soon. Everyone would discover her secret. She did not know that the quiet woman in the corner had a gift that would surprise everyone. For now, Sarah continued her ordinary life. She went to work, did her job, and came home to play piano. She was invisible to most people, just another face in the crowd. But inside her lived music so beautiful it could make people stop and listen in wonder. Sarah Chen was not just an office worker. She was so much more than anyone knew. The morning started like any other Tuesday at Morrison and Associates. Sarah arrived at 7:30 and settled at her desk in the corner. She turned on her old computer and began sorting through the papers that needed to be filed. At 9 o'clock, Linda called everyone to gather in the conference room. This was unusual. The company only held meetings when something important was happening. Sarah wondered if someone was getting fired or if the company was in trouble. All the employees crowded into the small conference room. Sarah stood in the back, trying to stay invisible as always. Brad Jenkins pushed past her to get a better spot near the front. He was wearing another expensive suit and smelled like strong cologne. Mr. Morrison, the company owner, walked into the room. He was a tall man with gray hair and a kind face. Everyone became quiet. Mr. Morrison rarely spoke to the regular employees. He usually stayed in his big office on the top floor. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Morrison said with a smile. "I have some exciting news to share with you all." Sarah listened carefully. She hoped it was good news, not bad news. "As you know, our company has had a very good year," Mr. Morrison continued. "We have helped many clients and made good profits. I want to celebrate our success with all of you." People started to smile and whisper to each other. This sounded like good news. "I am planning a special event for our company," Mr. Morrison announced. "We will have a talent show and dinner party. All the money we raise will go to the Children's Hospital charity." The room filled with excited voices. Jennifer from marketing clapped her hands together. Tom from sales started talking about what he might do for the show. Even quiet Lisa from human resources looked interested. "The event will be held at the Grand Community Center downtown," Mr. Morrison explained. "It has a big stage and can hold 200 people. We will invite our clients, their families, and other business partners." Sarah felt her stomach flutter with nervousness. A talent show sounded scary. She was glad she would not have to participate. She could help with the setup or serve food instead. "I want everyone to think about participating," Mr. Morrison said. "Everyone has special talents. This is a chance to show what you can do outside of work." Brad Jenkins raised his hand immediately. "I can do comedy," he said loudly. "I'm very funny. People love my jokes." Some people laughed politely. Sarah had heard Brad's jokes before. They were usually about other people and they were not very nice. "That's wonderful, Brad," Mr. Morrison said. "What about the rest of you?" Jennifer said she could sing karaoke songs. Tom wanted to tell funny stories about his sales trips. Lisa thought she might read a poem she had written. Sarah listened to everyone's ideas. They all sounded confident and excited. She felt very different from them. She could not imagine standing on a stage in front of 200 people. "I will put a sign-up sheet in the break room," Mr. Morrison said. "Please write your name and what you want to do for the show. The event is in 3 weeks, so you have time to prepare." After the meeting, everyone rushed to the break room to see the sign-up sheet. Sarah went back to her desk to continue working. She had no intention of signing up for anything. During lunch, Sarah sat at her desk eating her turkey sandwich as usual. She could hear her co-workers talking excitedly about the talent show. "I'm going to wear my red dress," Jennifer said, "the one I bought for my sister's wedding. I need to practice my stories," Tom said. "I want to make sure people laugh at the right parts." Brad was the loudest, as always. "This is going to be easy," he bragged. "I'm naturally entertaining. Some people are just born with it." He looked around the room and his eyes landed on Sarah. "Of course, not everyone should try to perform," he said with a mean smile. "Some people are better at staying in the background." A few people laughed uncomfortably. Sarah felt her face turn red. She knew Brad was talking about her. "Can you imagine Sarah trying to perform?" Brad continued. "What would she do? File papers on stage?" More people laughed. Sarah wanted to disappear. She finished her sandwich quickly and threw away her lunch bag. Jennifer tried to be nicer. "Maybe Sarah could help with decorations," she suggested. "She's good at organizing things." Sarah nodded and tried to smile. She was used to people thinking she was only good for background work. That afternoon, Sarah had trouble concentrating on her work. She kept thinking about the talent show. Part of her felt hurt by Brad's comments, but another part of her felt something else. It was a feeling she had not experienced in many years. It was the feeling of wanting to prove someone wrong. When Sarah got home that evening, she sat at her piano as usual. But tonight felt different. She looked at her hands on the keys and remembered how it felt to play for other people. Years ago, when she was younger, Sarah had performed for audiences. She remembered the feeling of sitting on stage with hundreds of eyes watching her. She remembered the silence that filled the room when she played difficult pieces perfectly. Sarah began to play one of her favorite songs, Chopin's Minute Waltz. Her fingers moved quickly and gracefully across the keys. The music was light and cheerful, but also showed great skill. As she played, Sarah thought about Brad's mean words. "Some people are just born with it," he had said. Sarah knew she was born with musical talent, but she had hidden it for so many years that everyone forgot it existed. Maybe even she had forgotten how good she really was. Sarah played late into the night. She practiced pieces she had not played in months. Her fingers remembered every note, every rhythm, every delicate touch needed to make the music perfect. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work early as always. She went through her usual routine of filing papers and answering phone calls. But something felt different inside her. During her lunch break, Sarah walked slowly to the break room. The sign-up sheet was still hanging on the wall. Many names were already written on it, with descriptions of what each person planned to do. Sarah stared at the sheet for a long time. Her hand reached into her pocket and found a pen. She held the pen above the paper, her heart beating fast. She thought about Brad's cruel words. She thought about all the years she had stayed invisible. She thought about the beautiful music that lived inside her, music that no one at work had ever heard. Sarah wrote her name on the list. In the space for talent, she wrote just one word: piano. As soon as she wrote it, Sarah felt scared. What had she done? These people had no idea she could play piano. They would expect something simple like chopsticks or happy birthday. They had no idea what was coming. Sarah walked back to her desk on shaking legs. She had just signed up to perform in front of 200 people. She had not done that in 20 years, but deep inside, Sarah felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt excited. That evening, Sarah sat at her piano but could not play. Her hands shook too much. She stared at the keys and remembered a time when playing piano was not scary at all. It was the most natural thing in the world. Sarah was 7 years old when she first saw her grandmother's piano. She had just moved in with Grandmother Rose after her parents got new jobs in the city. The old house smelled like cookies and lavender soap. "Do you want to learn to play, little one?" Grandmother Rose had asked. Sarah nodded eagerly. She climbed onto the piano bench, her feet dangling high above the floor. Grandmother Rose showed her where to place her tiny fingers. "Music is like learning a new language," Grandmother Rose explained. "But instead of words, we speak with sounds and feelings," Sarah learned quickly. Her small fingers grew stronger every day. Within a year, she could play simple songs perfectly. By age 10, she was playing pieces that most teenagers found difficult. Grandmother Rose was amazed by Sarah's talent. "You have a gift, sweetheart," she would say. "Music flows through you like water through a river." When Sarah turned 12, Grandmother Rose decided she needed a better teacher. They drove to the city every Saturday so Sarah could take lessons with Professor Williams at the music conservatory. Professor Williams was a serious man with white hair and thick glasses. He had trained many famous pianists. At first, he did not think a young girl from a small town would be special, but when Sarah played for him, Professor Williams sat up straight in his chair. He made her play the same piece 3 times, listening carefully to every note. This child has exceptional talent, he told Grandmother Rose. With proper training, she could become a professional pianist. Sarah began taking lessons twice a week. She practiced 4 hours every day after school. Other children played outside or watched television. Sarah played piano. She did not mind the hard work. Playing piano made her feel complete. When her fingers touched the keys, the rest of the world disappeared. Only the music mattered. In high school, Sarah won every music competition she entered. Other students knew her as the piano girl. Teachers and parents came to hear her play at school concerts. Everyone said she would be famous someday. When Sarah was 17, Professor Williams had important news. "The Preston Music Conservatory wants to meet you," he said. "They are offering you a full scholarship." Preston was one of the best music schools in the country. Only the most talented students were accepted. Getting a scholarship there was like winning the lottery. Sarah's parents were so proud. Her father took time off work to drive her to the audition. Her mother bought her a new dress. Even her younger sister, Emma, who usually did not care about classical music, wished her good luck. The audition was held in a grand concert hall. Sarah had never seen such a beautiful room. The ceiling was high and painted with gold designs. The stage had the most magnificent grand piano she had ever seen. 20 judges sat in the audience. They were all famous musicians and teachers. Sarah walked onto the stage in her new blue dress, trying not to show how nervous she felt. She sat at the piano and began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written. Most pianists spent years learning to play it well. Sarah had been practicing this piece for 6 months. As she played, she forgot about the judges and the scary audition. She became lost in the beautiful, complex music. When she finished, the concert hall was completely silent. Then slowly, all 20 judges began to clap. Some of them stood up. One judge had tears in her eyes. Sarah got the scholarship. She was going to study at Preston Music Conservatory for 4 years. After that, she would probably join a famous orchestra or become a concert pianist. Her first year at Preston was like a dream. Sarah lived in a dormitory with other music students. They practiced together, performed in concerts, and talked about music all day and all night. Sarah's teachers said she was the most promising student they had seen in years. She was chosen to play solo pieces with the school orchestra. Music critics from newspapers came to hear her perform. Everything was perfect. Sarah was living her dream. Then, during the spring semester of her second year, everything changed. Sarah was practicing late one evening when her phone rang. It was her sister Emma, crying so hard she could barely speak. "Sarah, you need to come home right away." Emma sobbed. "Mom and Dad, they were in a car accident." Sarah's world stopped. She dropped the phone and sank onto the piano bench. Her hands, which had played thousands of beautiful notes, now shook with fear. She drove home through the night, praying that Emma had made a mistake. But when she arrived at the hospital, she knew it was real. Her parents were gone. Emma was only 16 years old. She was still in high school and had no job. Sarah was 20 years old and had no money except her scholarship. The next few weeks passed like a nightmare. There were funerals and lawyers and decisions to make. Sarah tried to keep going to her classes at Preston, but she could not concentrate. "I have to quit school," Sarah told her favorite teacher, Professor Martinez. "Emma needs me. I have to take care of her." Professor Martinez was heartbroken. "Sarah, you are so close to finishing your degree. Is there no other way?" But there was no other way. Sarah could not afford to stay in school without her parents' help. Emma could not take care of herself. Sarah had to choose between her dreams and her family. She chose family. Sarah moved back to her hometown and got a job at a local business. She worked during the day and took care of Emma at night. She helped Emma with homework, drove her to school activities, and made sure she had everything she needed. Emma was a smart girl. She studied hard and got good grades. When she graduated from high school, she received a scholarship to study medicine. "I want to help people," Emma told Sarah. "Like you helped me." Sarah was proud of Emma, but also sad. Emma was following her dreams. Sarah's dreams seemed very far away. After Emma left for college, Sarah felt lost. She had spent 4 years taking care of her sister. Now Emma was grown up and did not need her anymore. Sarah decided to move to the big city and find a new job. She was 24 years old and had no college degree. The only work she could find was simple office jobs. She got hired at Morrison and Associates. The pay was not good, but it was enough to rent a small apartment. Sarah told herself this was just temporary. When she saved enough money, she would go back to music school. But years passed and Sarah never went back. The longer she stayed away from music, the harder it became to imagine returning. She convinced herself that her talent was not as special as everyone had said. Maybe she had just been lucky as a young person. Maybe she was not really good enough to be a professional musician. Sarah kept her grandmother's piano in her apartment, but she rarely talked about her musical past. It felt like a story from someone else's life. Now sitting at that same piano, Sarah remembered everything. She remembered the feeling of playing on stage. She remembered the judges clapping at her audition. She remembered Professor Martinez saying she was the most promising student he had ever taught. Those memories had been buried for 20 years. But they were still there, waiting. Sarah placed her fingers on the piano keys. She began to play the same Rachmaninoff concerto she had performed at her Preston audition. Her fingers remembered every note perfectly. As she played, Sarah realized something important. Her talent had not disappeared. It had been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. Maybe that moment was now. The 3 weeks before the talent show passed quickly. Sarah practiced every evening until her fingers hurt. She had chosen to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was a beautiful but very difficult piece that would take about 10 minutes to perform. At work, nobody paid much attention to Sarah's participation in the show. They assumed she would play something simple like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or maybe a basic song from a beginner's book. Brad Jenkins made jokes almost every day. "I can't wait to see what our office mouse can do," he said loudly during lunch breaks. "Maybe she'll play Mary Had a Little Lamb with one finger." People laughed, but not in a mean way. They thought Brad was just being silly. They had no idea how much his words hurt Sarah. Jennifer tried to be encouraging. "I'm sure you'll do great, Sarah," she said. "It's so nice that you're participating. What song are you going to play?" "It's a piece by Chopin," Sarah answered quietly. "Oh, that's nice," Jennifer replied, clearly not knowing who Chopin was. "I love those old songs." Sarah did not try to explain. She knew they would understand soon enough. The night of the talent show arrived. The Grand Community Center was decorated with colorful lights and balloons. Round tables filled the main floor and a large stage stood at the front. Behind the red curtains, Sarah could see a beautiful black grand piano waiting. Sarah arrived early wearing the same simple black dress she wore to all company events. She had washed and ironed it carefully, but it still looked plain compared to the fancy outfits the other performers wore. Jennifer wore a sparkling red dress with high heels. Tom had on a new suit with a bright tie. Even Lisa, who was usually quiet like Sarah, wore a pretty blue dress with jewelry. Sarah carried a small purse and wore her everyday black shoes. She looked exactly like what she was, a plain office worker who had somehow ended up on the program. The backstage area was crowded and noisy. Performers practiced their acts and checked their makeup. Sarah found a quiet corner and sat on a folding chair trying to stay calm. "Places, everyone," called the stage manager. "We're starting in 5 minutes." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. She closed her eyes and tried to remember her grandmother's words. "Music flows through you like water through a river." The show began. Mr. Morrison walked onto the stage in his best tuxedo and welcomed everyone. The audience was full of clients, employees, and their families. Sarah counted about 200 people, just as Mr. Morrison had promised. "Tonight we celebrate the hidden talents of our Morrison and Associates family," Mr. Morrison announced. "All the money raised tonight will help sick children at the city hospital. Let's give a warm welcome to our first performer." Jennifer went first. She sang "I Will Survive" while recorded music played in the background. Her voice was not very good, but she smiled and danced, and the audience clapped politely. Tom told funny stories about his worst sales meetings. People laughed at the right moments. He seemed relaxed and confident on stage. Lisa read a poem she had written about her children. It was sweet and made some people in the audience wipe their eyes. Then Brad Jenkins took the stage. He wore a shiny silver jacket and carried a microphone. He told jokes for 15 minutes, mostly about people he worked with. Some of the jokes were funny, but others were mean. Sarah noticed that not everyone was laughing. As each performer finished, Sarah felt more nervous. These people knew how to entertain an audience. They were comfortable on stage. Sarah had not performed for anyone in 20 years. What if I make mistakes? she thought. What if my fingers shake too much? What if people laugh at me? Finally, the stage manager found Sarah in her corner. You're next, he whispered. Are you ready? Sarah nodded, even though she did not feel ready at all. Mr. Morrison returned to the microphone. Our next performer is Sarah Chen from our accounting department. Sarah will be playing piano for us tonight. There was a pause as Mr. Morrison looked at his notes. She'll be playing Chopin's Ballad No. 1. A few people in the audience murmured. Some of them knew this was not a simple song, but most people were just waiting politely for whatever Sarah would do. Sarah walked onto the stage on shaking legs. The lights were bright and hot. She could see hundreds of faces looking at her from the darkness beyond the lights. She walked to the grand piano and sat on the bench. The piano was much bigger and more beautiful than her old upright piano at home. She adjusted the height of the bench and placed her feet on the pedals. From the audience, she heard someone whisper loudly, "This should be interesting." Someone else snickered quietly. Sarah looked out at the audience. She could see her coworkers at their table near the front. Brad was leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, a smirk on his face. Jennifer was smiling encouragingly. Tom was checking his phone. Linda, her supervisor, looked worried. She probably thought Sarah was going to embarrass herself in the company. In the back of the room, Sarah noticed an older man with silver hair sitting alone. He was watching her carefully with serious eyes. Something about him seemed different from the others, but Sarah did not have time to think about who he might be. Sarah took a deep breath and placed her hands on the piano keys. The room became quiet, waiting for her to begin. For a moment, Sarah felt frozen. Her hands trembled slightly above the keys. This was it. This was her chance to show everyone who she really was, or her chance to make a fool of herself in front of 200 people. Sarah closed her eyes and thought about her grandmother Rose. She thought about Professor Williams and Professor Martinez. She thought about the young girl who had won every competition and earned a scholarship to Preston. That girl was still inside her somewhere. Sarah opened her eyes, straightened her back, and began to play. The opening notes of Chopin's Ballad No. 1 filled the room. At first, they were soft and mysterious, like a question being asked. Sarah's fingers found their positions perfectly, just as they had thousands of times before. The audience was still talking and moving around. Some people were still eating their dinner. They expected this to be background music while they finished their meals. But as Sarah continued to play, something began to change in the room. The opening section of the ballad grew more complex and beautiful. Sarah's hands moved with increasing confidence across the keys. One by one, people began to stop talking. Forks stopped moving to mouths. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Sarah felt the change happening, but she kept her eyes focused on the piano keys. She was no longer in the community center. She was back at Preston playing for her professors. She was in her grandmother's house sharing music with someone who understood. The piece moved into its more dramatic section. Sarah's right hand played a flowing melody while her left hand provided a strong, rhythmic foundation. The music grew louder and more passionate. By now, the entire room had fallen silent. Even the servers stopped moving between tables. People turned in their chairs to get a better look at the small woman in the plain black dress who was creating this incredible sound. At the table of Morrison and Associates employees, mouths hung open in shock. Brad's smirk had completely disappeared. Jennifer stared with wide eyes. Tom had forgotten about his phone entirely. Linda, Sarah's supervisor, looked like she had seen a ghost. She had worked with Sarah for 12 years and had no idea this person existed inside the quiet woman who filed papers. Sarah reached the most challenging part of the piece. Her fingers flew across the keys in rapid passages that required perfect technique and timing. Not one note was wrong. Not one rhythm was unclear. The older man in the back of the room leaned forward in his chair. His expression had changed from mild interest to complete amazement. The ballad built to its emotional climax. Sarah played with power and passion that filled every corner of the large room. The music told a story of love and loss, hope and sorrow, triumph and defeat. People in the audience felt tears in their eyes without understanding why. The music spoke to something deep inside them, something they had forgotten existed. Sarah played the final section with delicate beauty. The powerful emotions settled into gentle sadness, then peaceful acceptance. The last notes hung in the air like a prayer. When the music ended, Sarah kept her hands on the keys for a moment. She took a deep breath and looked up at the audience. The room was completely silent. Not one person moved or spoke. The silence stretched on and on, so complete it felt sacred. Sarah began to worry. Had she made mistakes? Was the performance terrible? Why was no one reacting? Then slowly one person in the back began to clap. It was the older man with silver hair. His applause was slow and respectful, like he was honoring something precious. Another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in thunderous applause. People stood up from their tables, clapping and shouting. Some were crying. Others were shaking their heads in amazement. Sarah sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the reaction. She had not heard applause like this in 20 years. She had almost forgotten how it felt to move people with music. The applause continued for several minutes. People would not stop clapping. Finally, Sarah stood up and bowed politely, the way she had been taught at Preston. As she walked off the stage, Sarah felt like she was in a dream. Everything had changed in 10 minutes. She was no longer just the quiet office worker in the corner. Sarah barely made it backstage before people started surrounding her. She felt dizzy and confused. The applause was still echoing in her ears. Her hands were shaking, not from nervousness now, but from the rush of performing again after so many years. Sarah! Jennifer was the first to reach her, still wearing her sparkling red dress. Her eyes were wide with shock. I had no idea you could play like that. That was incredible. Tom pushed through the small crowd that was forming. Where did you learn to play piano like that? He asked. That wasn't just piano playing. That was like a real concert. Other people Sarah had never met before came up to her. Clients from the company, their wives and husbands, even teenagers who had come with their parents. That was the most beautiful music I've ever heard live, said an elderly woman with tears still in her eyes. You have an amazing gift, dear. A man in an expensive suit shook Sarah's hand firmly. I'm David Cooper from Cooper Industries, he said. We've been clients of Morrison and Associates for 5 years. I had no idea they had such talented people working for them. Sarah tried to answer everyone, but she could barely speak. Her voice came out as a whisper. Thank you, she kept saying. Thank you so much. The stage manager appeared beside her. Ms. Chen, there are more people who want to meet you, but maybe you need a moment to catch your breath? Sarah nodded gratefully. She needed time to understand what had just happened. Meanwhile, at the Morrison and Associates table, Sarah's co-workers sat in stunned silence. They looked like they had just witnessed something impossible. Brad Jenkins was the most shocked of all. His face was red and he kept running his hands through his hair. For the first time in years, he had nothing to say. I don't understand, he finally whispered. How is this possible? She's just Sarah from accounting. Linda was staring at the stage where the piano still sat. I've worked with her for 12 years, she said quietly. 12 years. How did I not know this about her? Jennifer shook her head slowly. She said she was playing Chopin. I thought she meant some easy song. But that was professional level. That was like the pianists you see on television. Better than television, Tom added. I've been to concerts at the Symphony Hall downtown. This was as good as anything I've heard there. At tables around them, other people were having similar conversations. Everyone was trying to understand how the quiet, invisible woman from the corner desk had just given them one of the most moving musical experiences of their lives. Mr. Morrison appeared at their table, his face glowing with excitement. Did you all know about Sarah's talent? He asked. Everyone shook their heads. This is remarkable, Mr. Morrison continued. In 30 years of running this company, I've never been more proud of an employee. We have a true artist working with us. Back in the quiet corner backstage, Sarah finally had a moment alone. She sat on the same folding chair where she had waited nervously just an hour ago. Everything felt different now. She looked down at her hands. They were the same hands that filed papers and typed reports every day. But tonight they had created something magical. They had made 200 people stop everything and just listen. Sarah remembered the feeling of playing the Ballade. As soon as her fingers touched the keys, 20 years had melted away. She was not the frightened middle-aged woman anymore. She was the young musician she had always been inside. The music had flowed through her exactly the way Grandmother Rose had said it would. Like water through a river, natural and unstoppable. Excuse me, Miss Chen. Sarah looked up to see the older man with silver hair who had been sitting alone in the back. Up close she could see that he was well-dressed and had kind but serious eyes. My name is Robert Martinez, he said, extending his hand. I wondered if I could speak with you for a moment. Sarah shook his hand politely. The name sounded familiar, but she could not remember where she had heard it. That was an extraordinary performance, Mr. Martinez continued. I've been listening to classical music for 50 years, and what you did tonight was truly special. Thank you, Sarah said softly. That's very kind of you to say. May I ask where you trained? Mr. Martinez asked. Your technique is flawless, and your interpretation was deeply moving. Sarah hesitated. She had not talked about her musical training in many years. I studied at Preston Music Conservatory, she said finally. But that was a long time ago. Mr. Martinez's eyes widened with surprise. Preston? That's one of the finest schools in the country. Did you graduate? No, Sarah admitted, feeling embarrassed. I had to leave during my second year. Family reasons? I see. Mr. Martinez was quiet for a moment, studying Sarah's face. Do you still practice regularly? Every evening, Sarah answered. I have a piano in my apartment. I play mostly for myself. Ms. Chen, Mr. Martinez said carefully, I should tell you who I am. I'm the conductor of the City Symphony Orchestra. Sarah's heart stopped. The City Symphony Orchestra was one of the best orchestras in the region. She had dreamed of playing with them when she was at Preston. I came here tonight as a favor to my friend David Cooper, Mr. Martinez continued. I expected to hear some amateur performances and eat a nice dinner. I certainly did not expect to hear anything like what you just played. Sarah could not believe what she was hearing. The conductor of the City Symphony had heard her play, and he was talking to her like she was a real musician. Ms. Chen, I would like to ask you something, Mr. Martinez said. Would you be interested in auditioning for our orchestra? We occasionally have guest soloists perform with us. Based on what I heard tonight, I think you would be an excellent candidate. Sarah felt the room spinning around her. You want me to audition for the symphony? She whispered. I do, Mr. Martinez replied. I know this is sudden, but talent like yours should not be hidden away. The world needs to hear you play. Before Sarah could respond, Jennifer appeared beside them. Sarah, there you are. Everyone's looking for you. The show is starting again, and Mr. Morrison wants to introduce you to more people. Mr. Martinez handed Sarah a business card. Please think about what I said. Call me when you're ready. Sarah took the card with trembling fingers. Robert Martinez, conductor, City Symphony Orchestra. His phone number and email address were printed in elegant letters. I have to get back out there, Sarah said, though she felt like she might faint. Of course, Mr. Martinez smiled. But Miss Chen? Tonight changed everything for you, whether you realize it or not. Your secret is out. Sarah walked back into the main room in a daze. The talent show was continuing, but she could barely pay attention to the other performances. People kept coming up to her between acts, wanting to talk about her playing. A music teacher from the local high school asked if Sarah would consider giving lessons to her advanced students. A woman who organized concerts at the community college wanted to know if Sarah would perform at their next event. Sarah's head was spinning. This morning she had been just another office worker. Tonight she was being treated like a professional musician. When the show ended, Sarah found herself surrounded by people again. Everyone wanted to shake her hand or get her phone number. Some people asked if she had recordings they could buy. I don't have any recordings, Sarah kept explaining. I just play at home. Well, you should make some. People told her. You're too good to keep this to yourself. Brad Jenkins finally approached her as the crowd was beginning to thin out. He looked uncomfortable and embarrassed. Sarah, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. The things I said about you, they were wrong and mean. I had no idea you were so talented. Sarah looked at him for a moment. She remembered all his cruel jokes and dismissive comments, but tonight she felt too happy to be angry. It's okay, Brad, she said simply. You didn't know. But I should have been nicer to you anyway, Brad insisted. You're a good person and you didn't deserve those comments. I'm sorry. Sarah nodded and shook his hand. She could see that he meant it. As Sarah finally gathered her purse and prepared to leave, Linda approached her. Her supervisor looked like she was still trying to process what had happened. Sarah, I need to talk to you first thing Monday morning, Linda said. We need to discuss, well, everything. The company should be supporting your musical career. This changes a lot of things. Sarah drove home through the quiet city streets, Mr. Martinez's business card sitting on the passenger seat beside her. She kept thinking about his words. Tonight changed everything for you. When she reached her apartment, Sarah sat at her old upright piano. It looked small and humble compared to the grand piano she had played tonight. But it was still her faithful friend. She placed her fingers on the familiar keys and began to play softly. The same hands that had amazed 200 people tonight played the same melodies they had played every evening for years. But something was different now. Sarah was different. For 20 years she had been hiding. Tonight she had remembered who she really was. Sarah Chen was not just an office worker who happened to play piano. She was a pianist who happened to work in an office. And tomorrow, everyone would know it. The weekend after the talent show felt like a dream that Sarah could not wake up from. Every few hours she would remember what had happened and feel shocked all over again. Saturday morning, Sarah's phone rang early. She almost never got phone calls, especially not on weekends. "Hello, Sarah. This is Jennifer from work. I hope I'm not calling too early." Sarah looked at her clock. It was 8 in the morning, which was early for a Saturday. "No, it's fine." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Jennifer sounded excited. "I just couldn't stop thinking about Friday night." "Sarah, you were incredible. I've been telling everyone about it." "My sister couldn't believe it when I described your performance." Sarah did not know what to say. She was not used to getting calls from coworkers, especially about her personal talents. "I was wondering," Jennifer continued, "would you maybe want to have coffee with me today? I'd love to hear more about your music background. I feel like I never really knew you before." Sarah agreed to meet Jennifer at a small cafe downtown. It felt strange to make social plans with someone from work. For 12 years, Sarah had kept her work life and personal life completely separate. At the cafe, Jennifer asked dozens of questions about Sarah's musical training. Sarah found herself talking more than she had in years. She told Jennifer about her grandmother, about Preston Music Conservatory, and about the scholarship she had won. "So you were going to be a professional pianist?" Jennifer asked with amazement. "What happened?" Sarah explained about her parents' accident and how she had to drop out of school to take care of her sister Emma. "That's so sad," Jennifer said, her eyes filling with tears, "but also so noble. You gave up your dreams to help your family." "I thought I was giving up my dreams," Sarah corrected. "But Friday night I realized that music never left me. It was just waiting." Sunday afternoon, Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was Tom from sales. "Sarah, I had to call you," Tom said. "My wife has been bugging me all weekend to get your number. She was at the talent show and she hasn't stopped talking about your performance." Tom's wife, Carol, came on the phone. "Sarah, I teach elementary school and I have some students who take piano lessons. Their teacher is not very good. Would you consider giving lessons? I know you probably don't have time with your job, but I had to ask." Sarah was surprised. "I've never taught piano before," she said. "But you're so talented," Carol insisted. "These kids need to hear real music played by someone who truly understands it. Please think about it." By Sunday evening, Sarah had received 6 phone calls from people who had been at the talent show.
3 people wanted piano lessons.
One person asked if she would play at their daughter's wedding. Another person wanted to know if she would perform at a fundraising event for the animal shelter. Sarah sat at her piano that night, feeling overwhelmed. For 20 years, nobody had asked her to do anything except file papers and answer phones. Now, suddenly, everyone wanted her to share her music. Monday morning at work felt completely different. When Sarah walked into the office building, Mike, the security guard, smiled widely at her. "There's our famous pianist," he said cheerfully. "My wife was at that talent show Friday. She came home talking about you for 2 hours straight." Sarah felt her face turn red, but in a good way. She was not used to being noticed, especially not for positive reasons. When the elevator doors opened on the 5th floor, Sarah saw that a small crowd had gathered around her desk. Her coworkers were all there, along with some people from other departments she had never met before. "Sarah," called out Lisa from Human Resources. "We've been waiting for you." "What's going on?" Sarah asked nervously. Linda stepped forward with a big smile on her face. "Sarah, we owe you an apology, all of us. We've worked with you for years and never really got to know you. We had no idea how talented you are. We want to make up for lost time," Jennifer added. "We'd like to take you to lunch today, all of us. We want to hear more about your music." Sarah looked around at all the faces smiling at her. These were the same people who had ignored her for 12 years. The same people who had never invited her to their parties or asked about her weekends. But their smiles looked genuine. They seemed truly interested in getting to know her better. That would be nice, Sarah said softly. At lunch, Sarah found herself sitting at a large table with 8 of her co-workers. They asked her questions about her favorite composers, her piano practice routine, and her musical training. For the first time in her working life, Sarah felt like part of the group. "I feel so bad that we never talked to you about music before," said Marcus from the accounting department. "I love classical music, but I never knew anyone else who understood it." "You should have seen Brad's face during your performance," Tom laughed. "I've never seen him speechless before." Speaking of Brad, he had been unusually quiet all morning. Around 2 o'clock, he appeared at Sarah's desk with a cup of coffee and a nervous expression. "Sarah, could we talk privately for a minute?" he asked. They walked to the empty conference room. Brad closed the door and took a deep breath. "I've been thinking all weekend about how I've treated you," he began. "Not just the jokes about the talent show, but for years. I've been dismissive and rude to you. I called you names behind your back. I made you feel invisible," Sarah nodded. She appreciated his honesty. "The thing is," Brad continued, "I think I was threatened by you somehow. You're so calm and competent at your job. You never complain or cause drama. You just do excellent work every day. I think I made jokes about you because I felt insecure." This surprised Sarah. Brad always seemed so confident and self-assured. "Then Friday night happened," Brad went on. "And I realized that not only are you an amazing employee, but you have this incredible talent that none of us knew about. You're probably the most interesting person in this whole office, and I've been treating you like you didn't matter." Brad looked genuinely sorry. "I want to be better. I want us to be friends if that's possible. Do you think you could forgive me?" Sarah thought about all the mean comments and cruel jokes Brad had made over the years. They had hurt her feelings and made her feel small and unimportant. But looking at him now, she could see that he was trying to change. And Sarah had learned something important on Friday night. Holding on to anger and hurt feelings only made life smaller. "Yes, Brad," she said. "I forgive you. Thank you for apologizing." Brad smiled with relief. "Great. And Sarah? I'd love to hear you play again sometime. Maybe you could give a small concert here at the office." The rest of the week continued to surprise Sarah. Mr. Morrison called her into his office on Wednesday. "Sarah," he said, "I've been thinking about Friday night, and I have an idea. What if we made music a regular part of our company culture? You could give short performances at client meetings or company events. We could even get a piano for the office." Sarah was amazed. "You want to buy a piano for the office?" "Why not?" Mr. Morrison smiled. "We have talented people working here. We should celebrate that talent. It would make our company special and memorable to our clients." By Friday, word about Sarah's performance had spread throughout the entire building. People from other companies on different floors stopped by to meet the amazing pianist from the 5th floor. Sarah's phone kept ringing with requests for lessons, performances, and interviews. A reporter from the local newspaper wanted to write a story about her. The community college called to ask if she would consider teaching a music appreciation class. But the call that meant the most came Thursday evening. Sarah was practicing at home when her phone rang. "Sarah, it's Emma." Sarah's heart jumped. Her sister Emma, who was now a doctor in another state, rarely called unless something was wrong. "Emma, is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Emma laughed. "But I just got the most amazing phone call." "Do you remember Mrs. Patterson, our old neighbor?" Sarah remembered Mrs. Patterson well. She had been at the talent show with her grandson. "She called me to tell me about your performance last Friday," Emma continued. "Sarah, she said you were incredible. She said you made 200 people cry with your piano playing." Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes. She had not talked to Emma about music in years. "I had no idea you were still playing," Emma said softly. "I thought you gave up music when you took care of me." "I thought I had given it up too," Sarah admitted. "But it turns out you can't really give up something that's part of who you are." "Sarah," Emma's voice was full of emotion, "I need to tell you something. I felt guilty for 20 years about you dropping out of school for me. I always wondered if you resented me for it." "Emma, no," Sarah said quickly. "I never resented you. Taking care of you was the most important thing I ever did. But now I understand something," Emma continued. "You didn't lose your dreams because of me. You just had to wait longer to find them again. And maybe the music you make now is even more beautiful because of everything you've experienced." After they hung up, Sarah sat at her piano feeling more complete than she had in 20 years. She had her music back. She had new friendships with her coworkers. She had opportunities she had never imagined. Most importantly, she had learned that it's never too late to remember who you really are. Sarah began to play Chopin's Ballad No. 1, the same piece she had performed at the talent show. 2 weeks after the talent show, Sarah's life had changed so much that she sometimes felt like she was living someone else's story. The phone calls and requests kept coming. Her small apartment felt too quiet after all the excitement and attention. On a Tuesday evening, Sarah was practicing when someone knocked on her door. She rarely had visitors, so she was surprised to see her neighbor from across the hall. "Hi, Sarah," said Mrs. Kim, an elderly woman who had lived in the building for 30 years. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to tell you something." Mrs. Kim looked nervous but excited. "I've been listening to you play piano for years through these thin walls. I always wondered who was making such beautiful music." Sarah felt embarrassed. "I hope it wasn't too loud." "I tried to keep the volume down." "Oh no," Mrs. Kim said quickly. "It was never too loud. It was perfect. Your music helped me through some very difficult times. When my husband was sick last year, your evening concerts were the only thing that gave me peace." This was the first time Sarah realized that her playing had affected other people, even when she thought no one was listening. "I wanted you to know," Mrs. Kim continued, "that you've been sharing your gift all along, even when you thought you were playing just for yourself." Wednesday morning brought another surprise. Linda called Sarah into her office first thing. "Sarah, I have some news," Linda said with a big smile. "Mr. Morrison and I have been talking and we want to offer you a promotion." Sarah was shocked. She had been doing the same job for 12 years without any promotions. "We're creating a new position," Linda explained. "You would still handle your regular accounting work, but you would also be our Director of Cultural Affairs. You would organize musical events for the company, perform at client meetings, and represent Morrison and Associates at community arts events. The best part," Linda continued, "is that the new position comes with a significant raise. You would also get paid extra for each performance you do for the company." Sarah could barely believe what she was hearing. Not only was her talent being recognized, but it was going to improve her financial situation as well. "Take your time to think about it," Linda said, "but we hope you'll say yes. Having you as our cultural ambassador would make Morrison and Associates stand out from every other accounting firm in the city." That afternoon, Sarah finally worked up the courage to call Robert Martinez from the City Symphony Orchestra. She had been carrying his business card in her purse for 2 weeks, taking it out and looking at it several times a day. "Mr. Martinez, this is Sarah Chen," she said when he answered. "We met at the talent show." "Sarah, I'm so glad you called. I was hoping to hear from you." "I've been thinking about what you said," Sarah continued nervously. "About the audition. I would like to try if the offer is still open." "Of course it's still open," Mr. Martinez said warmly. "When would you like to schedule your audition?" "As soon as possible," Sarah said. "I've been practicing every day." "Excellent. How about Saturday afternoon? We can meet at Symphony Hall. Just bring whatever piece you'd like to perform." Saturday could not come fast enough. Sarah spent the rest of the week practicing intensively. She decided to audition with the same Chopin ballade she had played at the talent show, since she knew it perfectly and it had already proven its impact on an audience. Friday evening, Sarah got another unexpected visitor. This time it was Jennifer from work, carrying a bottle of wine and a big smile. "I brought this to celebrate," Jennifer said. "I heard about your promotion and your audition tomorrow. I'm so proud of you." They sat in Sarah's small living room and Jennifer asked to hear Sarah play something. Sarah performed a short, sweet piece by Debussy called Clair de Lune. "Sarah," Jennifer said when the music ended, "I have a confession to make. Remember how I said I felt bad that we never got to know you before?" Sarah nodded. "Well, the truth is I always sensed there was something special about you. You had this calm, peaceful energy that was different from everyone else. Sometimes I would see you humming quietly at your desk and I wondered what songs you were thinking about." Jennifer took a sip of wine and continued, "I think part of me was afraid to get to know you better because I suspected you might be more interesting than me." "Does that sound terrible?" Sarah was surprised by this honesty. "It doesn't sound terrible. It sounds human." "I was right though," Jennifer laughed. "You are way more interesting than me. But instead of making me feel bad, it makes me want to be more interesting too. You've inspired me to take those art classes I've been thinking about for years." Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Sarah put on her best dress and took a bus downtown to Symphony Hall. She had never been inside the building before, even though she had walked past it many times. The hall was magnificent. The ceiling was painted with gold and blue designs, and the stage was enormous. In the center sat the most beautiful grand piano Sarah had ever seen. Mr. Martinez met her at the stage door. "Sarah, welcome to Symphony Hall. Are you ready for this?" Sarah's heart was beating fast, but she felt more excited than nervous. "I'm ready." "I should tell you," Mr. Martinez said as they walked toward the stage. "I've invited a few other people to listen to your audition. I hope you don't mind." Sarah did mind, a little. She had expected to play for just Mr. Martinez, but she had learned that sometimes the best things happen when you step outside your comfort zone. As they walked onto the stage, Sarah saw that about 20 people were sitting in the first few rows of the audience. Mr. Martinez introduced her to some of them. There were other musicians from the symphony, board members, and even a music critic from the city newspaper. "No pressure," Mr. Martinez said with a kind smile. "Just play the way you did at the talent show." Sarah sat at the magnificent grand piano and adjusted the bench. The keys felt perfect under her fingers. This instrument was designed for exactly the kind of music she loved to play. She closed her eyes for a moment and thought about her journey. From the 7-year-old girl learning at her grandmother's piano, to the scholarship student at Preston, to the office worker hiding her talent for 20 years, to this moment on the stage of Symphony Hall, Sarah began to play Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. From the very first notes, she knew this performance was special. The acoustics of Symphony Hall made every sound rich and clear. The beautiful piano responded to her slightest touch. The audience was completely silent and focused. Sarah played with more emotion and technical skill than she had ever achieved before. Every phrase was perfect. Every dynamic change was exactly right. The music told its story of love, loss, struggle, and triumph with absolute clarity. When she played the final gentle notes, the silence that followed was profound. Sarah opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. Every single person was staring at her with amazement. A few people had tears in their eyes. The music critic was writing furiously in his notebook. Then Mr. Martinez began to clap and the others joined in. But this applause was different from the enthusiasm at the talent show. This was the respectful, appreciative applause of professional musicians who recognized exceptional artistry. After the applause ended, Mr. Martinez walked onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that was extraordinary." He turned to Sarah. "Ms. Chen, on behalf of the City Symphony Orchestra, I would like to formally invite you to be our guest soloist for our spring concert series. We perform 3 concerts each month, and I would like you to perform in at least one of them." Sarah felt dizzy with joy. "You mean I passed the audition?" "You didn't just pass," said the concertmaster, a woman with silver hair who had been playing violin for 40 years. "That was one of the finest performances of that ballade I've ever heard." The music critic approached Sarah as she was leaving the stage. "Ms. Chen, I'm writing a review of your audition for tomorrow's newspaper. Could I ask you a few questions?" Sarah found herself giving her first newspaper interview. She talked about her grandmother, her time at Preston, and her years of practicing alone in her apartment. "What's next for you?" the critic asked. Sarah thought about her promotion at work, her upcoming performance with the symphony, and all the opportunities that seemed to be opening up every day. "I'm not sure exactly," she said honestly. 6 months ago, I thought my musical dreams were over forever. Now it feels like they're just beginning. I guess I'm going to see where the music takes me." As Sarah rode the bus home, she realized something important had happened during the audition. It wasn't just that she had impressed the symphony musicians, though she had. It was that she had finally, completely accepted who she was meant to be. For 20 years, Sarah had thought of herself as someone who used to play piano. Today she knew the truth. She was a pianist. She had always been a pianist. She would always be a pianist. Everything else was just details. 6 months later, Sarah's life looked completely different from the outside, but inside, she felt more like herself than she had in 20 years. Her apartment was the same small space it had always been, but now it was filled with flowers from grateful piano students, programs from her symphony performances, and invitations to play at weddings, fundraisers, and community events. The old upright piano still sat in the corner, but now it was joined by piles of sheet music, a comfortable new piano bench, and a small recording device that Sarah used to make practice recordings for her students. Sarah still worked at Morrison and Associates, but her new role as Director of Cultural Affairs meant that her days were much more interesting. She performed short pieces at client meetings, organized musical events for the company, and represented Morrison at arts festivals around the city. Her relationship with her co-workers had deepened into real friendships. Jennifer had indeed started taking art classes, and often came to Sarah's apartment for dinner and conversation. Tom brought his family to all of Sarah's symphony performances. Even Brad had become a genuine friend who helped promote Sarah's concerts on social media. Linda had become more than just a supervisor. She was now one of Sarah's biggest supporters and had convinced Mr. Morrison to give Sarah a flexible schedule so she could balance her office, work with her growing musical career. But the most important change was the one that had happened inside Sarah herself. She no longer felt like she was living a double life. The woman who filed papers during the day and the woman who played Chopin in the evenings were the same person. On this particular Saturday evening, Sarah was preparing for what might be the most important performance of her life. The City Symphony Orchestra had invited her to be the featured soloist for their annual gala concert. The piece she would perform was Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 23 in A major, one of the most beautiful and challenging works ever written for piano and orchestra. Sarah would play with the full symphony in front of an audience of 800 people, including the mayor, several famous musicians, and music critics from newspapers across the region. As Sarah practiced the concerto one final time, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. It had been exactly 7 months since the talent show that changed everything. Her doorbell rang at exactly 6 o'clock. Sarah opened the door to find Emma standing in the hallway, holding a bouquet of white roses and wearing a big smile. Emma. Sarah had not seen her sister in over a year. "What are you doing here?" "Did you really think I would miss your big concert?" Emma laughed, giving Sarah a tight hug. "I flew in from Chicago this morning. I have a front row ticket and I plan to cry through the entire performance." Emma looked around Sarah's apartment and noticed all the changes. The flowers, the sheet music, the programs from previous performances. "This is incredible, Sarah. You've built a whole new life in just a few months." "Actually," Sarah said, "I think I've just returned to the life I was always meant to have. I took a 20-year detour, but I'm back on track now." They sat together on Sarah's small couch, and Emma asked about the symphony, the piano students, and the changes at work. "I have something to tell you," Emma said when Sarah finished updating her on everything. "Do you remember Professor Martinez from your old music school? He was your favorite teacher." Sarah's heart jumped. She had not heard that name in 20 years. "Of course I remember him. He was wonderful. He believed in me when I was just a kid." "Well," Emma said with a mysterious smile, "I looked him up online a few months ago. He's retired now, but he still lives in the city where Preston is located. I sent him newspaper articles about your performances and a recording of you playing." Sarah stared at Emma in shock. "You did what?" "He wrote me back," Emma continued, pulling a letter from her purse. "He wants you to read this." With shaking hands, Sarah opened the letter. Professor Martinez's handwriting was exactly as she remembered it, neat and precise. "Dear Sarah," the letter began, "I was so happy to hear from Emma and to learn about your musical career. I have never forgotten you, and I always wondered what became of my most promising student. When you left Preston, I was heartbroken, not just because the school lost a talented musician, but because I worried that you might never return to music. I understand why you had to leave, and I have always admired the sacrifice you made for your family. But I want you to know something important. When I listen to the recordings Emma sent me, I hear something that was not in your playing 20 years ago. Your music now has depth and emotion that only comes from experiencing real life, both its joys and its sorrows. The young Sarah who auditioned for Preston was incredibly skilled but still learning about the world. The Sarah who plays now has something to say with her music. Your performance of the Chopin Ballade brought tears to my eyes. I hope you know how proud I am of you. You did not abandon your dreams. You simply took the long way around to find them. I will be thinking of you tonight as you perform with the symphony. Break a leg, as they say in the theater. With love and admiration, Professor Martinez. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. To know that her old teacher remembered her and was proud of her meant more than all the newspaper reviews and applause combined. There's more, Emma said softly. He's coming to your concert tonight. He flew in from across the country just to hear you play. Sarah could barely speak. He's here? Tonight? He wanted to surprise you, but I thought you should know. He'll be sitting in the third row with me. 2 hours later, Sarah stood backstage at Symphony Hall, wearing a beautiful black evening gown that Jennifer had helped her pick out. Her hair was styled elegantly, and she wore the pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, Rose. Mr. Martinez, the symphony conductor, found her in the quiet corner where she was doing her final warm-up exercises. "Sarah, how are you feeling?" he asked. "Nervous," Sarah admitted, "but also excited. I've dreamed of this moment since I was 17 years old." "You're going to be magnificent," Mr. Martinez assured her. "The orchestra loves working with you. You have such a natural musical instinct." Through the curtains, Sarah could hear the audience taking their seats. 800 people had come to hear the City Symphony Orchestra, and she would be playing the featured piece. 5 minutes. "Ms. Chen," called the stage manager. Sarah walked to the edge of the stage and peeked through the curtains. The concert hall was almost full. In the third row, she spotted Emma, and sitting beside her, an elderly man with white hair and familiar kind eyes. Professor Martinez had indeed come to hear her play. After 20 years, her old teacher was going to witness her return to the concert stage. The lights dimmed, and the orchestra members took their places. Mr. Martinez walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, then motioned for Sarah to join him. Sarah walked onto the stage, her head held high and her back straight. The applause was warm and welcoming. She bowed politely, then took her seat at the concert grand piano. The orchestra began the opening of Mozart's Piano Concerto No. 23. The music was light and cheerful at first, setting the stage for the piano to enter. When her moment came, Sarah placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The first notes of the concerto flowed out smooth and clear, blending perfectly with the orchestra. As Sarah played, she felt completely at home. This was where she belonged, on a concert stage sharing beautiful music with people who understood and appreciated it. The audience was completely silent, focused on every note. Sarah could feel their attention and appreciation. She played the challenging passages with perfect technique and the emotional sections with deep feeling. In the third row, Emma watched with tears of pride streaming down her face. Beside her, Professor Martinez nodded approvingly at every phrase, his eyes shining with joy at seeing his former student fulfill her destiny. The concerto moved through its 3 movements, playful and bright, then deeply emotional and finally triumphant and joyful. Sarah played each section with the skill of a master and the heart of someone who had waited 20 years for this moment. When the final notes rang out, the silence that followed was electric. Then the entire audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Sarah stood and bowed, her heart full of gratitude and wonder. The orchestra members tapped their bows on their music stands in the traditional musicians' salute. Mr. Martinez shook her hand warmly and gestured for her to take another bow. As the applause continued, Sarah looked out at the audience and saw faces filled with joy and amazement. She saw her co-workers from Morrison and Associates, her piano students with their families, neighbors from her apartment building, and dozens of people she had never met but who had been moved by her music. Most importantly, she saw Emma and Professor Martinez, both clapping enthusiastically and beaming with pride. After the concert, Sarah was surrounded by well-wishers backstage. Music critics wanted interviews, symphony board members congratulated her, and fellow musicians praised her performance. But the moment that meant the most came when Professor Martinez made his way through the crowd to reach her. "Sarah, my dear girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That was absolutely beautiful. You have grown into the artist I always knew you could be."